Hello everybody, I wanted to go over some of the questions on your most recent My Econ Lab quiz that I know some of you struggled with. This question is dealing with aggregate expenditure and real GDP, finding the macroeconomic equilibrium when you're given some data. So you're given the real GDP, consumption, planned investment, government purchases, and net exports. And you have all of this information. So you notice GDP is increasing, consumption's increasing with it. That's our positive relationship that we see in the consumption function. Planned investment, government purchases, and net exports are all exogenous and they stay the same throughout the entire model. So this is the information that's given. So let's just kind of block that off. And the first question that's asked is to find the equilibrium level of GDP. Well, we know the equilibrium level is when GDP equals aggregate expenditure. So what we need to do is we need to find the level of aggregate expenditure. So whenever you get a question like this, you have to find the level of aggregate expenditure. And remember, the level of aggregate expenditure is consumption plus planned investment plus government purchases plus net exports is going to equal that amount. So for each one of these rows, you just have to add up all of these numbers and you'll get that value of aggregate expenditure. So let's go ahead and do that. So 4,000 plus 1,500 plus 500 minus 200, right? If we plug that in our calculator, we can do this in our head. We say 4,000 plus 1,500 is 5,500 plus 500 is 6,000 minus 200 would end up being 5,800. So let's just continue doing that for each one of these. Again, we're going to add each one of these up to equal it. So we've got 5,600 plus 1,500 plus 500 minus 200. That's 5,600 plus a total of 2,000, which ends up being 7,600 minus 2 is going to be 7,400. We do the same thing here. We get 7,200 plus 1,500 plus 500 minus the 200. That's going to be 9,000. And you can check all this work in your calculator if you want. We do the same thing. We add all of that up. We're going to get 10,600. And last but not least, the last row we're going to add up. We're going to see that this is going to equal to 12,200. So now that we've calculated the level of aggregate expenditure, we can go ahead, if we want to, we can re-put this first level of income over here, our GDP, just so we can look at them closer. And so this was 5,000, 7,000, 9,000, 11,000, 13,000. And what we notice is that here is when they're equal at 9,000. So the equilibrium, my answer for this one, is going to be $9,000. That's going to be the equilibrium. Now the second question that was asked in this problem, the second question was asking for the marginal propensity to consume. Well, we know the marginal propensity to consume is we're saying how is consumption changing with my disposable income. In this case, taxes are equal to 0. So we're going to say how is consumption changing as my income changes. And we can take any 2 points of these. And so we notice if I go up here, income changes by 2,000, consumption changes by 1,600. Let's go ahead and write that out just so we're comfortable with it. We can see that consumption changed between 5,600 minus 4,000, whereas those same 2 points, income was the difference between 7,000 and 5,000. So in this case, it's 1,600 divided by 2,000. Plug in my calculator, I'm going to get 0.8. And so my MPC in this case is 0.8. The third question that's asked, it says, okay, let's suppose that net exports increases by amount. So let's suppose that net exports increases by $200. What is the new level of GDP going to be? Right? New level of GDP. So how much level is this GDP going to be? Well, what do I know? I know my multiplier effect, right? I know that my change in GDP is going to equal that multiplier times my change in net exports. Well, if I do this out, I know my multiplier is 1 over 1 minus MPC, and I know my change in net exports was 200. So I plug this in, right? It's 1 over 0.2 times 200, right? 0.2 is going to be 1 minus 0.08. And we know that this is going to be 5 times 200, which is going to equal to 1,000. So that's going to be my overall change in spending, and my change in GDP is going to be 1,000. So my new level of GDP, if number 4 is asking you for new level of GDP, right, my new level of GDP must equal 10,000 because it was 9,000, which we found here, but then it got amplified by 1,000, so now it must be 10,000. And that's how you do this type of question, which was on your My Econ Lab.